Tiba Jayo Jaya Gora Chander Aroti Koshoba Jana Vitata Vane Jagamana Loba Taki Nenitai Chand Bame Gadadhara Nikate Adwaita Srini Vasachatra Dara Pasiyache Gaura Chand Ratna Singhasane Aroti Korina Brahma Adi Deva Gane Narahari Adi Kori Chamaradulaya Sanjaya Mukunda Basu Kohushadikaya Shaka Bhaje Ganta Bhaje Bhaje Karatala Madhura Mridanga Bhaje Paramarasaya Bahu Koti Chandra Jini Vadana Ujvala Galla Deshe Vanna Mallam Kore Jalamalam Shika Shiva Shukanarada Preme Gada Gada Pakati Vinoda Deke Korara Sampada Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya
Hello.
Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, I'm going to need some help. Oh, Jai, Acyutananda Prabhu. Dandavat Pranams, Maharaj.
Yeah, I was misspelling the password. I had a little trouble, but I was misspelling it.
My obeisances to you, local Guru Prabhu.
About pranams.
Pranams, Krishna Chandra Prabhu.
Dandavat pranams.
We missed you. We missed you last time, local Guru. Acyutananda Prabhu was. Oh, what's that shloka? Local Guru knows that one.
He was serving a Vaishnava
Oh,
Well,
very
I
nice.
definitely
So-
see. I don't know that one.
till late.
I'm going to try to see where we left off. Does anyone remember here? I'm screen sharing, and I'm going down. I shut off the page by mistake. Actually, it wasn't by mistake. I'm uploading a lot of old kirtan cassettes, and I need all the bandwidth I could get, so I had to shut off this page. Let's see who's the Shrutidar amongst us here? Who can remember where we are?
Why?
I think we're getting close to it here. There is a specific difference between the pure devotee and confidential devotee. I know we read about Gadadhar and Srivas.
Did we do the most astonishing fact paragraph?
The most astonishing fact. Where is that?
Oh, it's
Both
like
of these are
order in
worshipers.
chapter 17.
Oh yeah, because we went on to talk about Gadadhar and Srivas. That's the next paragraph. Yeah. And I'm wondering if there is a specific difference between the pure devotee and the confidential devotee. Can you remember Acyutananda Prabhu?
I just remember that it said that Gadadhar and Srinivas are on the Vishnu platform.
Right. I think that's where we left off.
Now,
So Loka
anybody
Guru
else
Prabhu-
would say, even in the
Yes.
Gaudiya Sampradaya, they would say, no, they are in Shakti side, but they're on the Vishnu platform because they're purely transcendental in the Vaikuntha sky, in the Parabhyom, in Goloka. So
Mhm.
Prabhupada's doing that. It's not a mistake. It's there to maybe challenge someone to think and to start a discussion. Did I tell you about Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj? He would go to downtown Calcutta where gentlemen would congregate and in a park, and he'd walk through and bump into them. Excuse me. Then they turn. That was to get their attention, and then he'd start
You start preaching to them
preaching.
after banging into them.
So what paragraph are we on? I'll start.
Yeah.
What paragraph?
Okay. We are. Okay, but just before you start, though, I just wanted to get that clarity so it sinks in. I always understood that Srivas Thakur, Narada Muni represented Jiva Tattva, but no, you're saying no. They're
Say no. They are on the transcendental platform. Therefore, what is the exact word? Go to that paragraph.
okay. Welcome, Jivan Mukta Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhus.
Okay. Just up here, Gadadhar, by analytically studying the 5 diverse manifestations. That's the representation of the marginal potency. Srivas represents the spirit of all.
Both of these are worshippers of the other 3, but all 4 are the Lord's expansion. Where does it say they are on this platform?
Where does it say what? Excuse me?
It said they're all on the Vishnu platform.
Uh-huh.
Where does it say that?
I'm scouring that.
Go back one.
Even one more. Okay. No, I don't think it deals with it in the previous
All right,
one.
let it go. Let it go. Okay. I'll start reading.
There is a specific difference.
There is a specific difference between the pure devotee and the confidential devotee. The different potencies of the Lord are engaged in serving the Supreme Lord in different transcendental relationships. They are situated in conjugal love, in parental affection, in friendship, or in servitude. But notice he only puts 4. Not Shantarasa is not so much important. By judging impartially, one can find that the internal potencies of the Supreme Lord are engaged in conjugal love, are the best of all devotees. Thus, both the internal devotees and confidential devotees are attracted by the conjugal love of the Supreme Absolute Truth.
Why are we getting a feedback?
It ain't me. I'm getting an echo.
Do you have your phone on?
No,
Is that us?
Oh,
Let's see, they realize that
No.
we're on.
Everyone should mute.
maybe I
while-
should turn off the phone.
Somebody's on iPhone.
Oh, I'm going to go to settings and put it on airplane.
I'm gonna mute the iPhone.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Let's see if it makes a difference.
Sravanam Kirtanam. Sravanam comes first, hearing. You know, a deaf person can't talk. You have to hear first. Then they can learn to, but you'll notice deaf people, if they're born deaf, they will talk with that same kind of accent. Because they can just imitate the look of your mouth.
Okay,
Let's
where
go
were
back to
you?
the text. I had something fabulous to say.
Yeah, where were you?
Confidential and I remember when we had books with pages, and you could put a bookmark in there.
That's
These
how
are
I
the
do.
Yeah. Remember that paper? Yeah. I'm so old that in school our books were made out of papyrus. Where's the text?
Work.
Okay, I thought you were
Where's
looking.
the-
Excuse me. Here you go.
Here I go. By judging impartially, one can find that the internal potencies of the Supreme Lord who are engaged in conjugal love are the best of all devotees. Thus, both the internal devotees and confidential devotees are attracted by the conjugal love of the Supreme Absolute Truth. So someone once asked, how many people, what kinds of devotees know about the gopis? And someone answered properly, even us know about them. We're not in the Ras Leela tonight, but we all know that that is the highest thing. Go back to the text.
Do the parents of the gopis?
Okay, that's what. Yeah, that's when it comes to incompatible relationship. Can you keep the text on?
Oh,
I'm getting
sure. I
cross-
thought you were answering.
getting cross-eyed here.
Okay. Yes. Do the parents of the gopis know what's going on with Radha and Krishna?
Yeah, I mean, the statement was that all the devotees know about conjugal love.
Okay, there's a thing called audio ducking, and if somebody's talking, then I get muted. Okay.
No,
Third time. Now there's incompatible rasas. So parental rasa will not jibe, the word is jibe with a B, with conjugal. So Mother Yasoda doesn't believe that there's
son is-
anything conjugal. Well, he's my
son is-
baby. I'm still breastfeeding him. What do you mean he has girlfriends?
he's pure and
young.
uncontaminated.
He's too young. But yeah.
Well,
These
doesn't
are
that-
most
that's what-
confidential. Everyone, Sravanam first. These are, and I'm going to kirtan them. These are the most confidential devotees of Lord Chaitanya. Other pure devotees who are more or less attached to Sri Nityananda Prabhu and Advaita Prabhu are attracted by other transcendental relationships, such as parental affection, friendship, and servitorship. When such devotees are very much attached to the activities of Lord Chaitanya, they at once become confidential devotees in conjugal love with the Supreme Lord. So it is said that anyone who's attracted to Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, could you leave the text on?
Sure. Yes.
Anyone who is attracted to
Yes.
anyone
Just
third
speak.
time, anyone who is attracted to Lord, I'm gonna go home.
Prabhu, you are home.
Yeah. Under the table. I'm gonna hide under the table now.
Just keep speaking.
Yeah, well, when
Yeah, we
somebody
can
else-
hear you.
But when someone else talks, that I get,
Don't worry about it.
I worry. Anyone
We're all
who's-
ears.
I don't like to talk over people, and I don't like people talking over me. For the seventh time, practically all the people who are attracted to Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement will be attracted to the confidential devotees in conjugal love with the Supreme Lord. Phew, I got it out. Okay. Sridhar Maharaj told me, I asked him, did I tell you this? I asked him one day at the end of his talk, could you, and this is very nervous, I said, could you tell me Prabhupada's rasa? He said, yes, I can tell you, but now I have to go inside.
Now I
Maybe
have
wait
to
a
go
whole
what?
day and a whole night. And the next day he called me up. One more time, I tell you, I'm going to go. So the next, he made me wait a whole day and a whole night. And the next day he called me up and he started speaking tattva. And I said, you were gonna tell me Prabhupada's rasa. He said, yes, it must be Madhurya because of his attraction to kirtan. And that is the Audarya. There's Madhurya, quality of Radharani, and the Audarya, compassion, to reach out to bring in and engage other more and more devotees to meet Krishna.
Loka Guru Prabhu, would you like to read the next paragraph, please?
Sure.
Nice song by Narottam.
It's okay. There's a very nice song sung by Sri Narottam Das Thakur, a great devotee and acharya in the disciplic succession from Lord Chaitanya. Narottam Das sings, "When will there be transcendental eruptions all over my body simply by hearing the name of Gauranga? When will tears incessantly flow from my eyes simply by uttering the names of the Lord? When will Lord Nityananda have mercy upon me and make all my desires for material enjoyment insignificant? When shall I be purified by giving up all contaminations of material enjoyment? And when shall I be able to see the transcendental abode, Vrindavan? When shall I be eager to accept the 6 Goswamis as my prime guides? And when will I be able to understand the conjugal love of Krishna? No one should be eager to understand the conjugal love of Krishna without undergoing disciplinary training under the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan.
Gauranga bolite habe pulaka sarir, habe hamo heribo, Sri Vrindavan. Nayane bhave nira. When will the tears flowing from my? When will I feel shivering?
Gauranga bolite habe pulaka shari. So beautiful.
We used to sing that on the way back from the Ganges. Because we were cold, we were shivering.
Ecstatic symptoms.
What's the next line? How does it start? I already forgot.
Wait.
Hamana, what is it?
Yeah.
What's the title of that
I
song?
know that part. This is my first line. Go. I haven't sung it. It'll start with the first line of Gauranga Bolite Habe.
What's going on?
That might help.
Habe pulaka sharir, hari hari bolite.
Hari Hari Bolite Nayane Bhavinir.
Arakabe nitai chander karuna hoibe, sansara boshana mor kabe tucha hahabe. Vishayachariya kabe shuddha habe mahana, kabe hama hirabo Shri Vrindavana. Rupa Raghunatha pade hoibe akuti, kabe hama bujabo se jugala piriti. Rupa Raghunatha pade rahu mora ash, prarthana karoye sada narottamo das. What does prarthana mean? That's the title of his
Prayer.
song. Oh, okay.
Begging prayer. See, bandhana and the 9 forms of devotion, Sravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Vishnu, Smaranam, bandhana also means offering prayers. Prarthana really means praying for.
Okay. Did you ever hear anyone do kirtan in the style that Narottam Das Thakur allegedly did, or is that being lost?
That's the melody.
Okay, but I heard he did a certain. Is it called Padavali?
I don't
Kirtan?
know.
Okay.
That's
That's the way it is sung. And those melodies are centuries old.
Krishna Chandra Prabhu, the Sankirtan movement.
Yes. The Sankirtan movement, inaugurated by Lord Chaitanya, is a transcendental pastime of the Lord. By it, I live simultaneously to preach and popularize this movement in the material world. In that Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya, Nityananda and Advaita are his expansions, and Gadadhar and Srivas are his internal and marginal potencies, respectively. The living entities are also called marginal potency because they have either of two attitudes, namely the tendency to surrender unto Krishna or the tendency to become independent of him and try for material enjoyment. Due to this propensity for material enjoyment, the living entity becomes contaminated by the material world. When a living entity is dominated by a desire for material enjoyment and becomes entangled in material life, he is subjected to the threefold miseries of material existence.
Acyutananda Prabhu, what is that verse again? Buliya Bhogavanchakare. I think it fits this, doesn't it?
I heard it start with Krishna Bhuliya Jeev, but
Okay.
when you read it, it started differently from the Prema Vivarta. But I always heard Prabhupada say, Krishna Bhuliya Jeev Bhogavancha Kori.
And again, that's when the living entity forgets service to Krishna and wants sense gratification, he becomes overwhelmed.
Maya Nikote Gelo Bhogavancha Kori. Maya Nikote Gelo Maya Japa Kori. He has to suffer penance. He has to be punished. He receives the punishment. The important thing I always like to say, Maya Nikote, he's near Maya. Because he is near Maya.
Yeah, he can be easily covered over.
Mhm.
And he can see Maya and be attracted by the wonderful illusions.
Vijay Garanga Prabhu, you're next, all the way from west coast of Canada.
Okay.
There is a nice example.
Still waiting for it to come up. There's a nice example showing how Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement can save one from the miseries of material existence. Excuse me. The desire for material enjoyment is just like a seed sown in the earth. If a seed is inundated by too much water, there's no possibility of its fructifying. Similarly, if a conditioned soul is captivated by material enjoyment, because the seed of such enjoyment is within his heart, he can be overwhelmed and overpowered by a flood of transcendental activities performed in love of God. In this way, his seed of material enjoyment cannot fructify into a conditioned life of material existence. The conditioned living entities in the present age of Kali are being overpowered by the flood of love of God inaugurated by Lord Chaitanya and his associates.
Jiva Mukta Prabhu in this connection.
I was in that last paragraph.
Yeah.
I recalled a couple of sections in the Bhagavatam. I thought that Prabhupada was going to use the analogy of the seed being overpowered by a flood of water in the same way that he used the example of a fire being overpowered by a flood of ghee. That Prabhupada in one purport I have it written somewhere. Prabhupada said how if there's a fire and you put a little bit ghee at a time, actually the fire gains strength and grows by the ghee that's being added. But and that ghee represents sense gratification. But if that fire is inundated by a very large volume of ghee, the ghee will actually put out the fire. So the idea there was that, and it was a few places that I've read it in the Bhagavatam, that Prabhupada says that sometimes when a living entity is inundated with sense gratification, that inundation of sense gratification actually completely puts out his desire for any more sense gratification. Whereas here, the example of inundation is different, is used differently. Anyway, I just wanted to make that.
Nice.
In this connection, there is a verse written by His Holiness Prabodhananda Saraswati in his book Sri Chaitanya Chandramrita. This verse states that materialistic persons are very enthusiastic to maintain their family members, wife, and children, and that there are also many mystic speculators who are engaged in speculating about liberation from the miseries of material life, and who therefore undergo various austerities and penances. But those who have discovered the greatest transcendental flavor in the movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu no longer have a taste for such activities.
Any comment on that from you, Jivan Mukta Prabhu?
I was thinking today, actually, just a little while ago, while I was on my walk, that that those engaged in devotional service, have different objectives. Just like there's 4 different types of people who come to Krishna consciousness for different various reasons. Those who are suffering, those who want material gain, those who are, inquisitive, and those who are after the absolute truth. So likewise, the destination of those, the ultimate destination, or the result, or the response once they receive some Krishna consciousness is also different. So someone who is suffering, when they come to Krishna consciousness and they get relief, they're kind of satisfied. They got what they wanted. They got some relief and they're okay with it. Likewise, those who are suffering, likewise those who are a little inquisitive. The one who's after the absolute truth, though, the one who's after the absolute truth keeps digging and going after the ultimate goal, the highest achievement of spiritual life, which is pure devotional service. So sometimes, I was thinking that even in the Krishna consciousness movement, that you may have people who are happy just kind of achieving the level of going to this heavenly planets, or going to, what's the planet where all the Gyanis go to? The
Tapalok, Maharlok.
Yeah, Maharloka or Tapaloka. They're happy. Just kind of, they've achieved what they wanted, so they kind of go to those levels. But then there are some devotees who are just not going to be happy until they strive for the real jewel of spiritual life, pure devotional service. So it's not just, karmis who are going after, heavenly elevation or elevation to these different planets. It's those who are engaged in devotional service mixed with gyan, mixed with karma, mixed with yoga.
Yep. It's
devotional service, but it's not going to get them back to Goloka. It's going to get them to Maharloka. It's going to get them to Swargaloka. It's not going to get them to Goloka.
I heard
Bhakti
that.
Vinod, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Bhakti Vinod Thakur's commentary on that was that the four kinds, either you pray, they're all considered saintly, but sometimes you will get your desire fulfilled, or you'll get Krishna prema, and you won't care if your desire is fulfilled or not.
Like Dhruva.
That's
Remember.
why it's so important to have the association of a devotee who can remind you of what the goal is.
Yes.
We have to stay on the path. Sometimes we get lost. This looks exciting, that little branch, and the devotees, ideally the pure devotee, steers us back.
I reading this, what reminded me of that was sometimes as devotees, we get very comfortable with our children and our spouses, and we think, oh, I've got Krishna, I've got a nice wife, if you're lucky. I've got nice kids, if you're lucky, and I'm set. I chant, but actually, there's that element of going deeper, and really kind of not identifying even with them, even though they are in devotee dress, even though they're chanting Hare Krishna. Ultimately, one has to go beyond, and I find that that's something that is rare.
You got to get it from someone who's got it, and that's rare.
Yeah.
That's the flaw in Sattva Gun. Happiness. You get attached to peace and happiness and content and comfort.
Yeah.
Although you tend to get bored eventually.
But like Indra had to become a pig. And they said, come back, you're Indra, come back. No, it's warm here, nice mud, plenty of stool to eat.
I got my pig wife and my piglets, lots of responsibilities.
Yeah.
But a lot of, most of the time we don't apply those stories to ourselves. If we're devotees, we're thinking, oh, I'm a devotee. That doesn't apply to me. But actually, if we see all of these stories as being directed to us, that Krishna is speaking to me, my attachment to my wife, to my kids, to my business, to my, material situation, to my economic development, then that brings us to a different level of commitment in our sadhana, in our vairagya, in our practice of Krishna consciousness. It's our meditation changes.
We're talking about complacency here, right? I mean, Prabhu, can we extend this to, how about institutional complacency? Pseudo, like here, I'm surrounded by devotees, but if that devotee with the characteristic of being pure or driving for the purity is not there, you could also stay in such association for who knows how long, and go collectively to different destinations, material destinations.
But Prabhupada's there, so like we can't.
Prabhupada is there, yeah.
We can't use the excuse of the institution we can't use that as an excuse for our individual failing. We can't use that as an excuse for us to be lazy. Like,
absolutely true.
Ultimately, we are flying our own plane.
Yep.
We have to read Prabhupada's books. We have to get association of those who can kind of direct us and encourage us to dive deeper. And we have to do it.
Definitely.
Regardless of what's going on in the so-called, the institution, whatever, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But we have to be aware that it doesn't matter, just as you're talking about how in the family, but I believe it's a good red flag for those of us who are institutionally associated.
Become institutionalized.
What's going on in the institution can, at least I'll speak for myself, can actually become very distracting towards one's bhakti. One can become very distracted. Why the Swami is speaking like this? Why that guru is doing like this? And after a while, you can become absorbed and obsessed and find yourself off the path. I wanted to say, Jiva Mukta, I just wanted to just support your point about Janaloka, Maharloka, Tapaloka, Swargaloka. I don't know where Prabhupada said this, but I remember back in the 70s hearing that Srila Prabhupada stated, most of my disciples do not want to go back to the spiritual world. They want to go to the heavenly planets.
Yeah. I just want to say add one more thing, Prabhu, that, you know, don't you feel compassion for those who've got institutional responsibilities? Like, it is a tough gig.
Yeah.
You know, like if you are a sannyasi or a GBC, or you've been given, for whatever reason, if you find yourself in a position of guru, whether, I don't even want to get into the argument of whether, you know, the whole guru thing, but if you find yourself in that position, my goodness, do you realize the pressure, the responsibility, you know, the anxiety that comes along with that? You know, like, I would say, give them a break, give them a, you know, I mean, that's how I look at it. Like, I consider ourselves very, very fortunate in many respects that we do not have to deal with all that baggage.
I get it.
Hopefully that would drive you to the pure shelter, so that then it is successful. There's probably no much other solution.
Loka, maybe you can find this an article by Bhaktisiddhanta exactly about this, that these institutions are blocks, are dams and dikes that stop the flow of rasa, to be
an organized religion,
to hold some ministry of an organization.
Yeah, I can't get to it. Oh, wait a minute.
It becomes a job.
Unorganized religion.
And about going to, I wanted to say about going to Maharloka or Swarga, that's the story of the Indra and the ants. I have to tell them, you may go to heavenly planets, but again, Punar Janma, Abrahma Bhuvanaloka, Punar Janma. You can fall down again. You will fall down again. All like Indra and the ants.
Yeah, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta has an essay called Organized Religion. And let's see.
I found it.
Yeah. Oh, it says that the church that has the best chance of survival in this damned world is that of atheism, under the convenient guise of theism. The churches have always proved the staunchest upholders of the grossest form of worldliness, from which even the worst of non-ecclesiastical criminals are found to recoil.
Wow.
I love his language.
Here we go. This is his part of his conclusion. The idea of an organized church in an intelligible form indeed marks the close of the living spiritual movement. The great ecclesiastical establishments are the dikes and dams to retain the current that cannot be held by any such contrivances. They indeed indicate a desire on the part of the masses to exploit a spiritual movement for their own purpose. They also unmistakably indicate the end of absolute and unconventional guidance of the bona fide spiritual teacher. Then he says, the people of this world understand preventative systems. They have no idea at all of the unprevented positive eternal life. Neither can there be any earthly contrivance for the permanent preservation of the life eternal on this mundane plane on the popular scale. So that reminds me of a story that took place in Badger one year. Narayan Maharaj was there, I think it was 2008, and he was talking about establishing an organization, and one devotee, or not establishing one devotee was asking, Maharaj, shouldn't we try to expand what you've given? And he said, yes, that would be nice, but it will not be successful. And the devotee said, another devotee piped up and said, well, shouldn't we at least try? And he said, yes, that is bhakti. You know, even though things may be collapsing all around us, still we're trying, and that's bhakti.
Krishna sees the effort.
Yeah. Material world, everything is doomed to failure ultimately. It falls apart.
You have Bhakti Siddhanta, you're speaking pejoratively, you know, regarding institutions, yet he was establishing an institution.
Exactly.
64 mats, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The pure devotee, though, when he's present, he controls everything. When Prabhupada was here, there were problems. Everybody knows that. But somehow or another, the problems were all handled. You know, I'm not saying that the problems aren't being handled now. I'm just saying that we could all rely. We always had we knew that Prabhupada would handle the problems immediately, and we'd see how things evolved and the solutions manifested.
I mean, if we look at the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, there was, you know, some form, some kind of, not an official organization, but it was organized as far as, you know, etiquette and who did what. There was still some sense of hierarchy. You know, there was a hierarchy there.
Right.
And it wasn't something that was like, you know, a registered corporation or anything like that.
Right.
But it was still there. And I guess the, you know, now that we're talking about it, the challenge is to have some kind of organization with the freedom and the flexibility and the individual responsibility, that the realized individual responsibility that we accept ourselves, in that we have to be responsible to ourselves, that we cannot expect this person or that person or this, you know, we can't expect that, the people in the organization to you know, to take our hand necessarily and spoon feed us Krishna consciousness. That's something we have to do.
Right. Yeah, we have to, yeah.
We have to be grown up in a sense, you know, we have to grow up and just take that step yourself and walk. You know, your parents can hold your hand for a bit, but then you've got to take those steps. You have to walk.
Yeah, everyone in bhakti, though, the difficulty for a lot of us is, well, for myself anyway, is that we see that everyone is developing that sense of responsibility at different times. It's not going on collectively exactly at the same time. So we're always moving, it's people moving like this, you know, one person's appears to be making great advancements, someone's not, then he is.
And Prabhu, I think this is where, you know, Prabhupada's very, very simple instruction that we show love for Prabhupada and how we cooperate. I think that's where it comes in as well. At a certain point, regardless of, you know, there's so many mistakes that are being made and so many things that are happening. And ultimately, we just have to try to see it from that higher spiritual perspective that, you know what, we're all in different places. We all have different levels of commitment. We're all on this path, but there's just so many.
It's a big family.
Yeah.
You know, in the family, there may be a lot of kids, and the older kids help the younger kids. You know, if they have to go to school, you help them get dressed, you drive them, you do so many things. Then you attend to your own responsibilities. It's like that.
Did I tell you about Iskandas? That story?
Yeah.
Tell it
Yeah.
again.
He was a great devotee.
Can we name somebody Iskandas? Prophet said, no.
Well, you might as well name him GBC Das as well.
Just like Lord Chaitanya takes, and you have to bring dignity and facilities, like not paying taxes. Somebody, I told you this, someone said, why do we wear saffron? Now he meant, why do we wear saffron instead of blue or purple? But Prabhupada took it differently. He said, why do we wear saffron? To get free food and free train rides and free housing and no taxes. That's
Was,
why.
he was being
If you came to India
sarcastic.
in your American dress, do you think you would be invited? Being great, you know.
One of the
So-
things about bhakti is that it's so open to interpretation. There's so many ways to express bhakti that, after the pure devotee acharya leaves, it's just easy to get into different interpretation of what is really bhakti. And as far as organization goes, like we see the GBC is more inclined in some respects to be a business functionary rather than, diving deeper into the pure spirituality.
Well, I don't know. Let me just, speak.
Amen.
Not that I'm a GBC, sympathizer in that sense, but, they have to maintain the institution. So, there's just doing that is kind of a could be sometimes dry and very formal. And that's where those who are on the GBC, for example, might have certain responsibilities that are institutional, but it doesn't mean that them personally, themselves, individually, are not diving deeply into their bhakti. It's just that the institution itself requires, certain things to be done and certain things, in order to maintain it. And those may seem dry and mundane, or maybe not so deep from a devotional standpoint. But I wouldn't judge the devotees themselves as not being, going deeply into their Krishna consciousness.
Lavanya Mangala, would you like to read the next paragraph, please? Those who are under.
If our preaching is pure, if our preaching is pure and powerful, then 100 Amarishas and 100 George Harrisons will come.
Jai. Those who are under the impression that there is material contamination in the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and in his devotional service are called Mayavadis. According to their imperfect speculation, the impersonal Brahman is the only existence in the cosmic manifestation. As soon as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is introduced, they consider that his personality arises from Maya, or the external material energy. Such persons consider all incarnations of the Supreme Lord to be contaminated by this material nature. According to them, the material body and the activities of matter are all that give a living being an individual identity. According to them, liberation means the end of an individual identity for the pure living being. In other words, the Mayavadis maintain that when a living entity is liberated, he becomes one with the Supreme Impersonal Brahman. According to such Mayavad philosophy, the personality of Godhead, his abode, his devotional service, and his emotional devotees are all under the spell of Maya and are consequently subjected to the material condition. Those who forget the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord, his abode, his devotional service, and his devotees consider all these to be but manifestations of material activity. One who thinks that there is a possibility of arguing about transcendence is called an agnostic, and one who thinks that there is a possibility of criticizing transcendence is called an atheist. Lord Chaitanya wanted to accept all kinds of agnostics, atheists, skeptics, and unfaithfuls, and swallow them in the flood of love of God. Therefore, he accepted the renounced order of life to attract all these forces.
Any comments on that? Questions?
It reminds me of what the discussion we had about why Bhaktisiddhanta didn't appoint and acknowledge Srila Prabhupada as the successor Acharya, because of his being family man, businessman. Until he became sannyas, no one really took him that seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if he was sannyas, if he was a sannyasi at the time that Bhaktisiddhanta left his body, there is all indications that Prabhupada would have been appointed as the successor Acharya.
Well, some people think that there was a successor Acharya, and that person and Prabhupada formed an institution, and it spread all over northern India. It was called the Gaudiya Vedanta Samiti, and they formed it in 1941, I think. And wherever Bhakti Pragyan Keshava Maharaj would go, he'd have 20-30,000 people attending every night under pandals. He had something like 30,000 disciples, and not one sannyasi ever fell away from his sannyas. So there are some that think that was that. When he left and he became very ill, and when he left this world in 1968, Prabhupada manifested. The movement expanded greatly after 1968.
I'm just going on the basis of what Srila Prabhupada said in his purports.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, I'm just saying, that's there. In 1968, when Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshava Maharaj left the world, he asked someone, he had 3 successors, and he asked, I can't remember his name, not Vaman Maharaj, but one of them, to
Trivikram Maharaj.
Yeah, Trivikram Maharaj. Yeah, he asked one to send a portrait of Bhakti Pragyan Keshava Maharaj, and he wanted it placed in all the temples as part of the disciplic succession.
Sorry, who did? Who asked that?
Prabhupada.
Oh,
In 1968 in Seattle, when it happened. It's not very well publicized. It was never in, the Satsvarup Maharaj's books. Go figure. But
did he want Jadharani to paint a portrait from a photo also?
No, they wanted I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't really know. I just read the letter.
That would establish also that these are not my thoughts. These are the thoughts handed down by disciplic succession.
Yeah.
There can never be a book. The thoughts of, the philosophy of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, they're not his own thought. They're coming down by disciplic succession. So he wanted to show that. Because in America, we think, where does Jesus come from? Where does Buddha come from? Where did all of a sudden Muhammad is there? Poof, there's a great soul.
You're right.
It's not like that. It's in disciplic, it's unbroken chain.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because it makes me realize that even we have to realize that what Prabhupada is saying is not that we shouldn't be glorifying Prabhupada for coming up with something new.
Right.
But he should be glorified for not coming up with something new.
There you go.
Just preserving
the original.
Yeah.
And
Like he said, I've not, they asked him if he did any miracles. He was asked by a reporter, he said, my only miracles, I've not added anything, I've not subtracted anything, I've just given the message as it is. And that's amazing in itself.
That is a miracle.
that is
Miracle.
Yeah, 'cause we hear a lot of criticism these days about changes, changing this and changing that. We have with us tonight for the first time our dear god sister Nanda Patni Devi Dasi, all the way from California. Thank you for coming, dear god sister. What year did you meet Srila Prabhupada and take your initiation, and where?
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I first saw the devotees in London, which is where I grew up, in 1968 when I was still a schoolgirl. And then I saw Srila Prabhupada with George Harrison together the night that George presented the Silver Krishna book to him in the town hall in Kensington, London.
Wow.
And I didn't actually end up joining in London because I was so close to my family. I thought that this is just not going to work. So I went to LA, and Jadharani asked me if I would paint for the book. So I thought, okay, I'm joining this movement. And I went back to England to kind of settle things, and I got a cheap ticket back to go to the LA studios and paint, but I was so young and naive that I took a cheap flight to Vancouver and didn't have enough money to cross the border. So I ended up in Vancouver, and I was initiated there in 1975.
Was that after Mahatma Prabhu had already stopped his service there?
He was around and about as a traveling Sankirtan devotee. Us women used to kind of compete with all of them. It was very fiery in those days.
Dharmatma was there, Dharmatma?
No, Dharmatma was still New Vrindavan.
Okay.
And Bahudak really led the Sankirtan teams in the Western Canada, and we went all the way up to Fort McMurray in the Arctic area. You know, we went everywhere. Yeah. So,
did Srila Prabhupada have any specific instructions for you, or did you have any personal dealing with him?
No, sadly. I mean, I was initiated. I got my second initiation. You know, not too long before he left the planet, and Satsvarup Maharaj was our then, to use a loaded word, but you know, he was the Ritvik Acharya before Prabhupada left. Yeah. And so, you know, we became close to him. Yeah, but, you know, and then I went to various parts of the world after that.
You had the seed planted early on, 1968.
I did. It was all because of George Harrison. When he made the single record of the Maha Mantra, it went to #1 in the hit parade for about 6 weeks. And so even the sort of journalists and businessmen knew who the Haris were. Everyone knew the Haris in London. Yeah. I mean, really, we were a household name at that point.
Haris.
Yeah.
Would you like to read the next paragraph, Nanda Patni?
Yeah, I can have a go.
Where did we leave off? I think here.
Lord Chaitanya.
Is it Lord Chaitanya or those who are under?
Lord Chaitanya.
Okay. Lord Chaitanya.
Yeah, remained out.
It kind of gets cut off on the right hand of my screen.
You have to close the little.
Oh, I have to close the gallery somehow.
Yeah, there's a little button there that you press. There's a little line
to the left.
There's 4 different.
Oh, I see to the left.
Okay, mine's on the right.
Yeah, got it. So we're at Lord Chaitanya. Yeah. Lord Chaitanya remained a householder until his 24th year, and in the 25th year of his life, he accepted the renounced order. After accepting the renounced order, sannyas, he attracted many other sannyasis, and when he had been spreading the Sankirtan movement as a family man, many Mayavadi sannyasis didn't take his movement very seriously. But after the Lord accepted the sannyas order of life, he delivered not only Mayavadi sannyasis, but speculative students, atheists, and those who were attracted to fruitive activities and unnecessary criticism. The Lord was so kind that he accepted all these people and delivered to them the most important factor in life, love of God.
Any comments from that? Questions? What stands out for me is those who are attached to unnecessary criticism. And I'm just reflecting back at what Jivan Mukta said earlier, how even though we may not always agree with a GBC or initiating guru in ISKCON, give them a break because they're taking a lot on themselves. Not everyone may agree with that, but I appreciate his compassionate mood.
Well, you know what, it's like I've got managers managing different parts of my businesses and stuff, and you know, I expect people to just to give them a little bit of slack, you know, like just give them a little bit of elbow room, like, you know, people do sometimes, you know, err, and I don't agree with a lot of things that are going on, but at the same time, you know, they've been given the service, you know. If I see some of these younger sannyasis who, you know, I know someone in Toronto, like he's a sannyasi now, and he joined when I was a brahmachari, and now he's a sannyasi, and he's got responsibilities. He's trying to serve his guru, and he gets criticized no matter what he does. So it's a tough thing, you know, it's tough. And that's why I look at some of our situations, and it's like, you know, we don't have to deal with any of that. We don't have to deal with any politics. We don't have to deal with any, you know, criticism, because we have our own little, you know, space that we live in. And all we have to deal with is, by getting up early, get up early, chant your rounds, you know, read, you know, try to follow the principles as strictly as you can, dive deeply, and no distractions. No distractions. We're, in many respects, so fortunate.
Pradyumna, are you able to read, or are you busy with your child? I see you're muted. I tried to unmute you. If you're busy, I understand. I'll ask Ragabhumi, our god sister, to read if you're not able to. Welcome, Ragabhumi. Thank you for coming. You don't want to read either? You want to just listen? You just want to listen. Okay. I see that Sikarani is.
This reminds me of a story. You don't have this problem anymore, but in the beginning, nobody wanted to do the dishes. I was the cook, and Prabhu said to the cook, should not have to do the dishes, because two things: the cook is you're always cleaning while you're doing it anyway, but also it's an occupational disturbance that you say, well, I might want to use that pot, but I don't want to have to clean it after. So there must be another caste system to do the dishes. Nobody wanted to do it. So Prabhupada called us all into his room, and he said, everybody, one person take a day. So someone said, okay, I'll take Monday. Then there was silence. And finally someone said, I'll do Wednesday. Then there was a gap again. Prabhupada raised his hand. He said, I will take Thursday.
Acharya, teaching by example. I also read Prabhupada saying that for a cook, when the cook is finished cooking, he's also finished cleaning.
Yes.
And there's another statement, and I said this in Mayapur. I was asked to give Bhagavatam class one time, and I created a whole controversy because I had read a quote by Prabhupada in a letter where he said that if the kitchen is not cleaned by the time the cook is finished cooking, then Radharani has not accepted that offering. She is not. And then I went on to then I elaborated a little further, and I said, so as far as we know, we may be eating boga if the cook is not. And then the whole word went around Mayapur. Oh, Goradas has said we were eating boga if the kids. People started coming to me. Anyway, just throwing that out there.
Oh,
Gore doesn't like controversy.
That's what I told that day. He knows all the controversy.
Gore runs away. Gore runs away from controversy.
He likes to gossip about
Sikarani, I'm
controversy.
gonna mute you, Sikarani. It's your turn to read.
Yeah.
Your turn to read, Sikarani. Okay, where were we now? To fulfill his mission.
To fulfill his mission of bestowing love of God upon the conditioned souls, Lord Chaitanya devised many methods to attract those who were uninterested in love of God. After he accepted the renounced order, all the agnostics, critics, atheists, and mental speculators became his students and followers. Even many who were not Hindus and who did not follow the Vedic principles accepted Lord Chaitanya as the supreme teacher. The only persons who avoided the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were those sannyasis who were known as the Mayavadi philosophers of Banaras. Their plight is described by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami. The Mayavadi philosophers of Banaras were less intelligent because they wanted to measure everything by direct perception. On the basis they calculated that whatever is perceived by material means is Maya or illusion. Since Maya is full of very jaded, I have never heard this word.
Variegateness.
Yeah, and the absolute truth is transcendental to Maya. They concluded that there is no how do you pronounce it?
Vividta.
Variatedness in the absolute truth. What does that mean?
Vividta.
Oh, okay, nice. Good.
They have the example, I gave it last time, that there's big air and small air.
Mm-hmm.
It is formless, and if there's form, it must be Maya. So they think Krishna, because he has a form, it must be maybe it's sattvic. And then I was in Vrindavan and I collected some red flowers to offer, and some Mayavadi said, oh, deities in the modes of goodness do not accept red flowers. I said, how can Krishna be in the modes of goodness? He's dancing with other men's wives. How do you figure that out?
what was their answer?
They go silent. They love silence. They love.
I heard that
protested with silence.
I heard that Lord Shiva receives hibiscus flowers, and they're red flowers.
Yes, Kali also has. It grows here also. There's a red flower with a big pistil stamen out of like a tongue. That's offered to Kali.
No, here Prabhupada's referring to as Benares. So is Varanasi a newer name for Benares? Benares is the old name?
I think so.
Banaras is Varanasi. Yes, it's Varanasi.
Varanasi. Kashi. Kashi also. Kashi Vishwanatha Shambhu. Gange. So it's called Kashi and Varanasi. And the British said, well, let's make it British and call it Benares. They did so many.
Acyutananda Prabhu, is the Benares sannyasis, are those represented by Prakashananda and his followers?
Right.
So Lord Chaitanya eventually did get to them.
But there were others that were not. And Prakashananda's disciples, but there are others who did not come. But Prakashananda's disciples said, we never understood this Advaita. We only followed it because we're in that sampradaya. And there's a verse, sampradaya, hey. You stick with your sampradaya even though it goes wrong. Similarly, any institution, we can say that,
Sounds like a pep rally at high school.
Yeah, it's a yes.
I'm thinking as well as much as Lord Chaitanya took sannyas and was able to, Gaur Prabhu, could you bring the text back, please?
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of go over the last paragraph there. Okay, so to fulfill his mission, Lord Chaitanya devised many methods to attract those who were uninterested in love of God. So Srila Prabhupada also devised, and Prabhupada gives the example that all bona fide acharyas devise, the ways and means to bring people to Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
And so, one of the ways, of course, was that he accepted the renounced order, and because of that, people automatically offered him all respects. Prabhupada was already in the renounced order, and he did get that respect. The example was given also of Hayagriva Prabhu. When they first saw Prabhupada, even these Western, young people, they immediately had that sense of reverence for this, saintly person, because of, they can see he was, a Swami, a renounced person. So Prabhupada talks about that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, as we all know, that he devised means to bring people to Krishna consciousness. And once they were in Krishna consciousness, then he introduced all the principles of civilized Vedic life.
Yeah, I have not read a paragraph, so I guess it'll be my turn now. Is it after there's okay, right? During Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, there were also other impersonalist philosophers known as the Mayavadi philosophers of Saranat. Saranat is a place near Benares where Buddhist philosophers used to reside. And even today, many stupas of the Buddhist Mayavadis can be seen. The Mayavadi philosophers of Saranat are different from the impersonalists who believe in the impersonal manifestation of Brahman. According to the Saranat philosophers, there is no spiritual existence at all. The fact is that both the Mayavadi philosophers of Benares and the philosophers of Saranat are entrapped by material nature. None of them actually know the nature of the absolute transcendence, although superficially accepting the Vedic principles and considering themselves transcendentalists. The philosophers of Benares do not accept spiritual variegatedness because they have no information about devotional service. They are called non-devotees, or those who are against the devotional service of Lord Krishna. I just wanted to comment that as probably most of you know, there's a big following of Buddhism in America.
I know.
I was taking a four-season permaculture design course, and they were calling it eco-spirituality. And there was a lady by the name of Joanna Macy, and she was in her 70s or 80s. And she was, a spokesman for Gaia, for the goddess, and how ultimately the goddess, will push back against, the evil influences of consumerism, and she will reign supreme. But she fancied herself as a Buddhist. And I was seeing how a lot of people were equating the Buddhist philosophy with environmentalism. And I was thinking, we as Vaishnavas, we should actually be heading up the environmental movement. Any comments on that, Acyutananda Prabhu?
Well, the Buddhists, their liberation is to become nothing. Nirvan, van means forest. So nirvan means to burn down the forest. That's where the saffron came from. That's where they wear saffron. We get the saffron from first Buddhism, then Shankaracharya, who was going to make a prachanna, hidden Buddhism. And so we also accept the Madhvacharyas, they take an Ekadandi sannyas also, even though they're Mayavadi, even though they're Vaishnavas. Lord Chaitanya took Ekadandi sannyas also from a Mayavadi, who he, of course, became a devotee, Bharat, Keshav Bharata. But but it was the just like if you in the West, if you were to wear a black suit with a white collar, people think you're a pastor. I even saw some Scientology guy wearing a priest. They call it a church, and they have a cross on the top. And so people think, well, it's a church. It's not. But also about Vividha Vishishta, Sikarani, Vividha Vishishta. I want everybody, I read it every year. The Adi Leela chapter 5, the Balaram Nityananda chapter, very long. And it also quotes in the purport by Bhaktisiddhanta, translated by Prabhupada, that in the Vedanta Sutra commentary, Govinda Bhashya, it explains that the Mayavadis don't know this, but before Brahmajyoti are the Chaturvyuha. It doesn't even go up to Goloka yet.
Yeah.
But these Chaturvyuhas are mentioned, and the expansion of those 4 Vishnus is the Brahmajyoti. Mayavadis can't go there. They don't know what to do about that. But there it is mentioned in Vedanta Sutra.
There's a section here I want to read from Srila Prabhupada regarding all these groups and environmentalism and veganism and vegetarianism. And Prabhupada says, people must be intelligent enough to catch up this Krishna consciousness movement without being carried away by any sentimental wave. We should always remember that we do not belong to any group like the Karmis, Gyanis, or Yogis. We belong to pure devotional service group, following the footprints of great Mahajans. Our purpose should be that we are in one side, all others, they are on the side. We deprecate everyone, even one who is against animal slaughter. We are not environmentalists. We are not vegetarian. We are not any of these things. Prabhupada said that over and over again. Devotees getting involved in this stuff, it's a complete distraction from delving deep into the principles of devotional service. It's a distraction.
Well, my question is as Lord Chaitanya found the ways and means of tricking people to accept Krishna, like, for example, from our godbrother Stamba Prabhu, and also Radhanath Swami also learned from Stamba Prabhu. At the University of Toronto in the 1980s, I was holding a course called Cooking and Consciousness, and I established the University of Toronto Vedic Cultural Association. And I would, based on Stamba's cooking course, Cooking and Consciousness, I had 6 or 7 courses. First was destroying the protein myth that people need meat to get protein, and then the economical advantages of vegetarianism. Okay,
Gaur Prabhu, let me just interrupt for a sec.
Yeah.
Simple question I want to ask you. How many devotees did you make?
Difficult for me to say. I mean, I distribute a lot of plates.
No, how many devotees joined the temple from that program?
I didn't see anybody shave up and move in on the spot.
Right.
I started
mostly I was preaching to the Jewish community, because University of Toronto heavy Jewish community, and the Rabbi Moshe Silverman came after me, and he started publishing in the university paper. If you meet a young man on campus, he's very, very friendly, and he seems to be able to answer all your questions. Beware, you've met a dangerous member of a cult called the Hare Krishna cult. They brainwash people. They use.
Yeah, but how many got liberated?
And so I ordered from Israel. I ordered the Grand Classics of India. I ordered in Hebrew Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, Krishna book, and the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto, and I brought them to the Rabbi Moshe Silverman at the Jewish Student Union, and I presented them to the rabbi, and I came back a couple of weeks later, and he said to me, Gauradas, if people want to be, because I was telling them that if you chant, you know how the Jews are the chosen people of God, because the students would come to my book table and I'd say, well, you know, the chosen people of God are called the Jadu dynasty. So Jadu, Judah. And I said, if you chant this mantra, Hare Krishna, you'll become an even better Jew. It's very.
Did you tell them what Krishna did with the Yadus?
No, of course not. And so then the rabbi, when I went to meet
That's
him,
the
he said,
conclusion.
"Boretas, if people want to become Jew, you send them to me. If people want to become Hare Krishna, I send them to you. Jewish festival is not complete without liquor and flesh. You understand?" And I said, "Well, the head rabbi of Haifa, he's a vegetarian, and on Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to wear." And Adam and Eve in Garden of Eden, they're originally vegetarians, right? And the rabbi did not like. I felt very strange preaching to a rabbi about Judaism.
Well, there's a reason for that. When I was the chaplain at the university, I got invited to Yom Kippur, and the conclusion of the whole event was, we're not here to answer questions. We're here to raise more questions. So you were answering questions. What the hell?
Oy vey.
I just want to make one other point, Gaur Prabhu.
I see where you're going, Jivan.
Look, like for example, if you make adjustments to bring in feminists, for example, which we've done in ISKCON, right? So what happens is that, okay, you attract them, but then if the preaching, it's a very delicate situation, because then what happens is those principles start like ink in milk, start affecting the milk, start tainting that purity of Krishna consciousness. So if we're preaching purely, if the milk, pure milk is being poured in the glass, if that is pure, that's going in the glass, even if there's a little bit of ink, it'll get expunged, it'll get pure, it'll get pulled, it'll be removed. But if our preaching is the ink, if we're like presenting the ink, it's going to contaminate everything.
I see your point, and I'll support your point for a moment. I'll support your point, but I'll also challenge your point. Prabhupada told Jagadish that we have to change our Sankirtan lines, because if we're telling people that we're feeding people in Biafra and doing food relief in Africa, then it's cheating, and we're going to similarly attract people of a cheating mindset. That's your point. At the same time, I heard when Radhanath Swami was doing this same Cooking with Consciousness course in Athens, Ohio. He was getting hundreds of, like 200 people, and a lot of them would just come for the prasadam. So for me to say that Radhanath Swami made zero devotees, or that, I mean, I went to one of Stamba's programs at State College. He had that place, that little preaching house, jam-packed with university students that were coming from his cooking course. I'm not saying you're wrong,
Did they make devotees though? Did they?
I don't know.
In
they did.
In Washington, D.C., where we had a college preaching program when we started a cooking course in 1975, ultimately we made about 20 devotees from that.
Wow.
Who moved in the temple.
Wow.
And the last devotee from that program got initiated about 3 years ago, finally.
Mm.
I
think you plant seeds. You plant seeds with these things. For example, you know, I was helping to run the radio station in Utah in the, I don't know, early 80s, mid 80s. And we ran a program called Eating Healthy and Karma Free, you know, and we broadcasted this all over the place. It went up on satellite, actually, to many stations across the country. And, you know, we would hear back from hundreds of people. We used to send out the Higher Taste cookbook, et cetera, et cetera. And I've thought about this issue quite a bit. I looked at Dayananda's book. He tried to approach this subject. He wrote a book about it recently. But I think the closest thing, my opinion is the closest thing was Prabhupada's indication in trying to run these cow protection programs and have farms with simple living and high thinking. Because I'll throw this question out here that I was struggling with. For example, when you have thousands of Vaishnavas flying all over the world to go on pilgrimage in India, you know, I would run the big ecological question mark in my mind. Like, how do we reconcile that with current thoughts of being, more ecological? When
carbon footprint, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be interested in feedback on that. Is that just something that one doesn't necessarily even have to entertain as a Vaishnava?
If we remember how Prabhupada preached about vegetarianism to, what's his name, Danny Lowe. Remember in Paris?
Oh, okay.
Right, Cardinal Lowe.
Cardinal Danny Lowe, right?
Oh, Cardinal Danny Lowe.
He always brought it back to Krishna. He always brought it back to God consciousness. Here's Prabhupada quoting, even so-called vegetarians who do not take Krishna prasadam are as much sinful as the non-vegetarians.
Right.
Okay? We are not interested in turning people into vegetarian because they're as sinful as the non-vegetarians. What are we doing? Now, if you want to use vegetarianism as a way to bring people in to introduce Krishna principles to them.
Exactly.
Fine. But we're not interested in turning people to vegetarianism.
Of course.
No, that's
right.
So likewise, in Washington, what we did is we taught people how to cook a few preps, and then we taught them how to offer it.
Right.
And part of the offering, we chanted around together.
Nice.
And that's how we did it. There was no eco. And when Prabhupada, and we're going to find out in the future that the eco farms are not going to actually work out the way they want because people are going to need shelter. They're going to be coming to our farms, Prabhupada said, by the millions, and they're going to look for shelter, how to be fed, how to be taken care of. And we're going to have to hopefully use our brains and figure out how to implement what Srila Prabhupada asked us to a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
Prabhupada said, we are Krishnatarians.
Yeah.
And from my experience, the vegan and the vegetarian, secular vegan, they just love animals.
Right.
They feel sorry for animals.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
If they can come to a temple because we're protecting animals and they taste prasad, well, then they've had a successful life. Just by tasting deity prasad even once, they're guaranteed a human birth.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And they don't even know how fabulous they can replace with higher taste, because like here in the South, somebody said, well, we're vegetarian. We don't eat meat, fish, or eggs. Then what do you eat? They think eating means food, means meat.
Yeah.
In the cooking shows, they don't even like to say, but they'll say, okay, these are your vegetables. This is your salad. Here's your dessert. What's your protein? They don't want to say meat, but they're calling it protein. You get protein from leafy vegetables. Your body produces protein from so many vegetables.
Nuts, beans, seeds, and dark leafy greens. Those are the four.
And we get if we need animal income, we take it non-violently by milk products. Now the vegans don't like even that. But when we take the milk and make ghee and yogurt, and the cow is liberated then, or gets a human form of life, or a devotee life.
So the course was such that, like, for example, with Stamba's program, he had Gita Nagari bringing super curd sabjis for these university students, getting them all. Similarly, with New Vrindavan, they would supply Radhanath Maharaj in Athens, Ohio, and Columbus, Ohio, with fabulous curd sabjis. So by the time the 6th vegetarian cooking class came around, we were talking about vegetarianism in Judaism, vegetarianism in Islam, vegetarianism in Christianity. And finally, the last class was vegetarianism and Vaishnavism, or Vedic culture. And then we'd bring in Patram Pushpang Palantoyam. It was a gradual process, as Prabhupada would say. I hear Jivan Mukta Prabhu's points, but it was a strategy that I tried to utilize. And I would hide all the sweet balls. The devotees would get angry at me because I'd be hiding all the burfi and sandesh so I could bring it to my university students. They were my.
No, but that's.
I didn't finish how
I
didn't finish how I invented gulaps last Wednesday. So because I went into we were talking about Ekadasi, and Prabhupada said, even though there was
Cornstarch.
cornstarch, but the gulabs are fried and they would break up. No, powdered milk. It came to me from Sarva, everybody, Sarvasya Chaham Hridhi Sannivishto Mataspatir Jnanam. So Paramatma sent me an idea. Said, wait a minute, powdered milk is milk solids. So we don't make milk, we put less water and make powdered milk dough. And then Prabhupada came in and said, but it's sticking to our hands. And then again, Prabhupada said, put oil on your hands. And then we made the balls that way, fried, and boom. So I did a
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu, for that.
The rest is history.
So
ISKCON bullets.
I would just like to say I
That was
totally
my-
agree with
my-
what Jivamukta is saying, because I've seen young vegans, who go to these parades and vegan pride stuff, and they have total lack of respect for animals, actually. And their philosophy is now going like, we would rather just have the cows just all die out. We don't need to put that garbage in our body. And cow's milk is poison. And they have a total disrespect. They actually don't care about animals. They just care about their health and
Their bodies.
their own sense of self-importance. And
Back in 1980, when I was doing this cooking course, there was not the fanatical vegan thing happening. And we were introducing people to paneer subjis, and they were digging it. They were loving it.
Our secret weapon in Washington was halava. We could make it so it was like cake, and people would come by. We'd bring out halava the next day at the university where we had the programs, and people would be coming by scarfing down the halava. Any halava left? Got any more?
But see, I think Prabhu, Loka Guru Prabhu, I think your program was really, I think, the component that really changed it was introducing the prayer the prayer to Lord Krishna. Like that's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful
when we started it, the temple president, Brisha Kapi, he didn't have a clue how to cook. His wife would show him how to cook one prep during the day, and he'd come out. We'd be cooking all that day on Wednesday, and he'd come out and cook the prep. He didn't know what he was doing. He was just making a show and talking about Krishna while he was doing it. And that was the whole thing. We didn't have there was no veganism. There was no, what's that group? PETA, People for the Ethic Treatment of Animals. That hadn't been invented yet.
The devotees had invented that. We were there, we were before any of these people.
Yes. Why they formed those things. Yes. They're like an impersonalistic version.
And what they've done essentially is they've taken Krishna out and tried to still make themselves feel as if that they're doing something positive to the world. Whereas Prabhupada has told us, no, when the vegetarian takes out Krishna, he's as sinful as the non-vegetarian. There's no difference. When the PETA people take Krishna out of that equation, they're as sinful as the animal killers.
I think also it's like what Pradyumna Prabhu just said. I think it's a vicious circle because they don't have milk products. Milk is brain food. So they lose that brain power, and they say absurd things.
So in the pastime of the Chankadzi, Prabhupada explains, because of the pushback of the Chankadzi and the Smarta Brahmins, Prabhupada said, this is proof of our potency, that if we have resistance. So similarly, the rabbi, he took it to the next level, and he wrote in the Varsity, the newspaper that went out to 50,000, mostly Jewish students, in around 1980, basically warning the students not to stop and talk to me because I was dangerous. So I went to the editor of the newspaper. I said, "Excuse me, may I make a rebuttal to the rabbi?" And he said, "Well, yes, but we won't take responsibility." I brought some cauliflower pakoras and some tamarind chutney, and they really liked that. And so my article was when the persecuted become the persecutors. And I stated, we've all heard about Auschwitz and the horrible things that happened to the Jewish people at the Holocaust. But what a great paradox when those who have been persecuted become the persecutors themselves. I said, I have a son.
Oh my God.
Yes, I went for the jugular. I said, I have a son, Dhananjaya. He's going to be going to university. I want him to be able to walk down the hallways of this university feeling proud that he's a Vaishnav devotee of the Lord. I said, if I were to speak about Jewish people, the way the Rabbi Moshe Silverman is denigrating Vaishnavism, I said, I'd have 10 Jewish lawyers down my throat and they'd be getting me for slander. So anyway, that was my article. And then the rabbi organized a Cult Awareness Week. And so I disguised myself and I walked up to his table. I said, "Excuse me, do you have anything on Hare Krishna?" And he said, "Yeah, here." And he handed me this article, Dial Om for Murder, about and then he organized a talk. He brought in an ex-devotee. I never met him before. Maybe some of you would know him. His name was Jagannath Sutta Prabhu. He used to be a writer for the BTG.
He is the one rascal editor. He's the rascal editor.
So I went in plain clothes and I sat in the lecture hall when Jagannath Sutta came up and he said, "Yeah, I used to be a Hare Krishna." He said, "I used to be in the Philadelphia temple and I wanted to learn Sanskrit, but the temple president, Ravindra Sarup, he told me that I had to go out on Sankirtan." He said, "That's how they get their money. They go out and they sell their books and flowers." But he said, "I didn't want to do that. I wanted to study Sanskrit, but they told me I couldn't do that." And so I was thinking, well, gee, I guess it's a little dangerous sometimes to force devotees to go on Sankirtan because we might turn them off. Anyway, he was being paid to come and speak against the
So the question should have been, so now that you've left the temple, are you studying Sanskrit? No. Okay, then you didn't really want to do that, did you?
Point.
Well, that's the example of, I don't like that they call it Sankirtan. Book distribution and fundraising, vital. But Sankirtan means the congregational chant.
Well, Srila Prabhupada called book distribution the Great
Mridanga.
It's like Great Mridanga, okay, but it turned into money.
Right.
And there were devotees who were sent out. Some presidents, I met some devotees said, our president said, just sell books. Other presidents said, stop selling books, sell paintings.
Right.
Jivan Mukta and myself,
give out lollipops.
Well, that's what happened to our college preaching program. We were no longer allowed to go out to the university and waste that time. Rather, the devotees should do something fruitful.
But the Toronto temple was purchased by lollipop sales. And Jivan Mukta and I, we were both painting salesmen. I had a quota of $1,500 a week. And Jivan Mukta, I think he doubled that. He was huge. So I'm not promoting paraphernalia, but I'm just saying we were both full-time fundraisers. I don't, Divija Garanga, I don't know if you got into that yourself.
No way.
That's not Sankirtan.
No, that's not Sankirtan.
But that's fundraising, fine.
Yeah.
But Prabhupada got furious when someone said, well, we told him to stop chanting. Someone said, I can't go, I have to finish my rounds. So we said, oh, well, don't chant on your rounds, get out.
Yeah.
Prabhupada was furious. Well, we chant for service. So stop chanting. Here's your service. So you don't have to chant anymore?
Yeah,
Prabhupada was, who said that? Who has said this? Actually, and also there's somewhere there's a video, Prabhupada sitting surrounded by devotees, said, you read my books or you only know how to sell?
He said that to Gopa Vrindapal.
Okay.
Yeah.
When the Radha Damodar party came and visited Srila Prabhupada in Atlanta, they had a special darshan, and Prabhupada asked them a question. They asked Prabhupada a question. What pleases you the most, Prabhupada? And they were waiting to hear that their books should go out. And he said that you learn to love Krishna.
It was Narantra that asked that loaded question. What pleases you the most?
Yeah, well,
Love Krishna.
yeah.
You thought he had set up Prabhupada.
It was a little bit of a surprise for most of the devotees.
That's surprising as well, isn't it? Isn't it surprising that the thing that Prabhupada would be most happy with, that we would expect it to be anything other than
Yeah.
to love Krishna?
For sure.
True. True.
That's surprising.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing too. Mother Lavanya was saying something, brought up the issue of how, devotees approach devotional service in different ways or have different ideas about devotional service. But this is why we also have Prabhupada's books and all the Shastra, to make sure that we're not deviating from what's acceptable to the Acharyas, to the Goswamis, that, the ideas that we have are in line with what Lord Chaitanya finds, what Lord Chaitanya taught is acceptable.
Yes, simultaneously we are, we have the organizational framework through the Acharya system, but still bhakti, there's so many different ways to express it. It's just an amazing phenomena of our particular spiritual path, that you really can approach it from so many different, and that's the beauty of it. But it should be a good thing that we can appreciate that factor, but not, simultaneously we have to have the commonalities. But
well, you can have someone saying that they're approaching bhakti by getting, getting high every night on weed. I mean,
but I'm saying it has to be within the context of the acharyas and the regulative principles and the parampara, and the disciples. But still, even within that, there's a lot of ways to interpret how to become a bhakti yogi,
Srila Prabhupada, when he was Abhay Charanaravinda, would make appointments with businessmen in Calcutta and go to their offices with Bhakti Dayit Madhav Maharaj and Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, the three of them. And they would go to collect and make donations. And if they didn't give, then he said Sridhar Maharaj would speak very nicely. And then they would give. But I saw Madhav Maharaj collect. Now this is a story. Ready? This is called The Master at Work.
Yeah.
Sannyasi cannot sit alone with women. So there were 4 ladies in Calcutta, Chaitanya Mutt. 4 ladies came into his room. I happened to walk by. Madhav Maharaj says, Acyutananda, come in. Sit next to me. And it was kind of like, hey, kids, sit here and learn something. These 4 ladies were the wives of the rice king, the dal king, the flour king, and the sugar king of Calcutta. And they came and they said, we came to donate some grains, each of us our kind of product for your parikrama coming up. So Madhav Maharaj goes to the first lady, the dal lady. She says, oh, no, koto chai, how much do you need? Koto prayojan, how much do you need? He says, 10 mond. 10 monds. A mond is 200 pounds. He was asking for 2,000 pounds of dal. And she freaked. How much, my husband will not permit that. He said, how much can you give? 5 mond, 500, 1,000 pounds. Now, the other 3 ladies are there. He didn't have to say a word. He just looks at the dal lady. He looks at the sugar lady. He says, 5 months. Then he turns to the atta, the flour grain lady. 5 months. Then the sugar lady says, 6 months. 6 months. He started a competition with them on how they give. Then he looks back, and the other 6 months, 6 months. He looks at the other one, 6 months. The doll lady held out at 5 months, though. But and then they walked out. Whew, we got off easy. He let them off the hook because he was going to ask them all for 10 months. But he collected thousands of pounds there just with a look.
Wow. Powerful.
And he also, even though Prabhupada wrote that letter to Rupanuga and said, show it to all the devotees, no one should associate with my god brothers, he sent Bhagavat Maharaj and Gaur Govinda Maharaj to learn how to do life membership from Bhakti Dayat Madhav Maharaj. The same person had invited them to come, and Prabhupada sent them.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the reason some temples are against other Sampradaya Vaishnava gurus or something from Gaudiya Math is because they think they're going to be competition for collecting. Here's Madhav Maharaj telling another God Brothers disciples how to collect money in the field in the same territory, and he's telling them how to make.
Well, there's also another story about Bhakti Dayat Madhav Maharaj, that somehow or another Srila Prabhupada contracted tuberculosis. And we don't read it in Satsarup's biography, but nonetheless, Prabhupada contracted tuberculosis. And Bhakti Dayat Madhav Maharaj took him in. And there was a medication they had that cost over 100 rupees a day. And so Bhakti Dayat Madhav Maharaj went out and collected that money, purchased the medication every day for Srila Prabhupada.
Wow.
And Prabhupada was extremely gregarious. We can't think that he had no friends. I mean, we all have friends, and he's a pure devotee. Everybody's his friend.
Just imagine though, Prabhupada's got all these young, impressionable,
right,
immature disciples.
Exactly.
Right? So he's got to establish, even though like someone like Acyutananda, he had no problem with Acyutananda Swami, dealing with all of his god brothers.
Right.
But could you imagine if Prabhupada left it open for all of his disciples? Like the disaster it would have been?
Of course it would have been.
He had to establish a point where he says, okay, no, don't associate with my god brothers, right? That's different, because otherwise it would be pandemonium.
Exactly.
Right.
And the other thing is, but see, the reason I bring it up is because most of us are at an age and a level of Krishna consciousness where we can appreciate these things. Whereas if we were newer devotees, I mean, the devotees didn't even know that they shouldn't wear shoes in the temple until after 1969.
Yeah.
I mean, Mangalarti started at 7 o'clock until around then.
It was a big deal in India in the 70s, so because of Maharishi, that every guru should have. He's not a guru unless he has some foreign disciples to show off, and they would love to walk around with some
the white elephants.
Now it's happening in
you
Indian
produce
marriages.
your white skin, you come there, you produce your white skin, they'll say anything to get you.
The Beatles, Mike Love, Donovan,
Beatles,
the Maharishi.
Now they are showing off 3 white friends in their marriages.
Sorry, 3 white what?
3 white friends for the Indian marriages.
Oh.
The weddings.
There you have like reverse racism.
Yeah, well, Prabhupada talked about Brahmins. They wouldn't allow lower caste people even in their house. But when when the British came, come in. It was okay. British doctor, British
That
officer.
happens during elections. All these Brahminical high caste politicians, they will go and eat in the house of a poor lower caste person. But if you see, actually, like, they won't allow the media to cover, but they will actually take their own utensils, and they won't even, they will actually take their own food, but they will just
well, that's actually funny.
One note about politics. I didn't know at the time. I was interviewed by some newspaper man in South India. He was from the Ambedkar Buddhist. There was a great leader of the lower caste, what they call the Dalits, the untouchables,
Mm.
and they converted, and it's called a Protestant Buddhism. They
Yeah.
only because they were approached by Sikhs and Christians and Muslims. Well, we don't have a caste either, but he chose to become Buddhist. So there's a whole community of lower caste, because also the Christians, they're called rice Christians. The Christians would give rice and then they convert. We have a
in
god
3
brother.
lakh Indian rupees, in 3 lakh Indian rupees, I think so many, like 3 lakh Indian rupees is just like, I would say, maybe 20, no, not even 20, $10,000. They are all Hindus are converting to Christians in India, just in $10,000.
So they pay them that.
Yeah. So many. And you will know the people, like some of them are so clever that they will take the money. They will say they are converted, but in their house they will pray Krishna only. So now they have the money.
Let Acyutananda finish his
We have a god brother also in this line. He was Parsi. Mahashaya Swami, I forget. He was Parsi. And he went to a Christian school. And every year, the Monsignor would come talk to his father. He's not doing well, you know, and we could give him more help if he was Christian. And if the family would convert. And then he said every time he would come, my father would go into his wallet and give the priest some money. And okay, that settled it. But they would put pressure. Oh, there was a terrible policy when a Hindu lady would give birth in a hospital. They wouldn't release the baby until they converted. This was terrible.
Oh my
There's
God.
a complication. The baby isn't well, but you know, we could give more help if you were Christian. You know, they wouldn't.
Yeah, I know.
It was a very, very terrible thing.
When I was
in South India.
Yeah.
When I was in Udupi, staying at Dr. Shiv Kumar's Ayurvedic clinic, I went down to the Arabian Sea one day. I got off the little bus and I saw a big sign on it said, if you're Hindu and you convert to Christianity, we will give you a loan of so much money for your house. If you convert fully, you don't have to pay back the loan. We'll provide education for your children, food, medical bills, this, that. And I thought, wow, this is really, yeah.
But there's a funny story. There was Hindu, there's all of the different Protestants sects, Methodists and Lutheran, they join together and they have the CNI, CSI, Church of North India, Church of South India. So, because it would be confusing if you're a Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran. So they united, Church of North India, Church of South India, and they're Protestants. So this Hindu man had a baby, he converted to Christianity, and they were going to baptize the baby. And he said, well, I want my child to be named after God. I want him to be named Jesus. Protestants don't name children Jesus. He said, we don't give that name. He said, well, I want him named after a name of God. He said, well, pick another one. He said, okay, Krishna.
Yeah, that is very common. In my house, everybody has a name after God, like another name. It's very common.
Just going back to Lord Chaitanya for a moment, and you know how he took sannyas and how he tricked so many agnostics, atheists. So our godbrother Charu Prabhu in Utah, as Nanda Patni was mentioning earlier, not only through his radio programs, but he got tens of thousands of dollars donated by the Mormons to help him build a beautiful Krishna Balaram style temple. And one of the big things that he holds now, I don't know if Jivan Mukta Prabhu will, if he will approve, but Taru Prabhu holds these holy festivals where thousands of Mormon kids come and they throw the colored dyes and they have a Hare Krishna reggae band on the stage and they all take prasadam. What do you make of that?
I know a little, because the color festival, the Mormons go there because it's clean. It's a big rock festival, but there's no booze. There's no smoking, there's no intoxication. It's clean, and they like it for that.
That was the big thing living there, you know, running the radio station, was eventually when I left there, I actually flew out and found myself in New Jersey airport, which was like the hellish planet. I mean, you know, all this sort of meat roasting, smoking cigarettes, and oh my God, you know, it really made you realize how clean the Mormon atmosphere was and is, you know. Yeah, they have a huge following with school children, and they've been very clever raising funds, breeding their llamas. They breed alpaca. They make a ton of money breeding alpaca.
But there's a Mormon joke that a rabbi tells. Says, why did God make Mormons? So that Christians will know how Jews feel. For thousands of years, the Bible was the Hebrew Bible. Then the Christians made up another 27 books. I know that because it's 3 into 3 into 3. Trinity, Trinity, Trinity. 27 books, and they glued it on the back of the Hebrew script. They call it the Bible. Then the Mormons came and they took their Book of Mormon and they glued that on. There's an edition that's this thick, and they call it the Bible, you know. So really, really ugly.
Or Prabhu, I just wanted to say that there is a big difference there, because prasadam and the holy name, it was just like a big Sankirtan festival.
Yeah, so I was bringing a feast from the Toronto temple to the people.
No, I don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing your program. I think it was a wonderful program. But what I'm saying, all I was saying is that we can't. I was reading basically what Prabhupada said, that we're not interested in turning people into vegetarians. We're not interested in ecology per se. We're not interested in any of these, mundane, so-called, good deeds. We're not interested in.
So let me play the devil's advocate for a moment. So does that mean that devotees who may have a penchant towards environmental issues, they should not attend environmental conferences and try to give the Vedic view of permaculture? You should not.
That's how some devotees became vegans, because they went to vegan festivals and the vegans insulted them. So I can't believe you're taking milk and butter. You're supporting the dairy industry, and they felt embarrassed, and they actually were weak, and they became vegans also. The planet is called Goloka, for God's sake.
Just like
one of my friend only did that. Gora Prabhu, you know, right? About Suprita.
Yes.
She also was a Krishna devotee, and now she's a vegan, and she chastised Gora Prabhu.
but that's another point. You can be a vegan and still be a Krishna devotee.
Yeah, but I don't know, like.
Prabhu, there's, for example, if someone's trying to establish nonviolence, we do not promote nonviolence. Prabhupada, I was reading today where Prabhupada was very critical of the United States for not being militarily more aggressive against Russia, the communists, the Soviet Union. If we present that aspect of Prabhupada to the world, they won't look at us as humble, compassionate, sadhu, like in the mundane sense.
Wishy-washy.
Prabhupada was not that person.
Prabhupada said he wanted the Temple of Vedic Planetarium to be built for the purpose of destroying atheism in the form of communism and atheistic science.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just exploring the idea, the ways and the means. You know, what determines, you know, what's permissible, what's not permissible. It seems to be a thin line.
Kunda Maharaj is working on a book to
Which Maharaj? Which one?
Mukunda Maharaj.
Okay.
He's working on a book to scientifically prove the value of a milk-based diet, and he's looking for devotees who have credentials and expertise to help him to, qualify, because there's such a backlash from the vegan movement, and even so many devotees are very, very obsessed with veganism, right?
No problem. No problem with that. I read one thing.
There's a message from Gora that he's leaving. Is he?
No, that's the Raga always, whenever Raga Bhumi always comes in, she uses my name, Gora. I don't know why she does it, but
Oh. Well, I never liked her anyway.
All right, well, I disagree on one thing. I miss meeting Prabhupada's godbrothers a lot. I miss that a lot. I think that Prabhupada was, or the tone of being against the godbrothers was a little bit too much. It's gone. No, I'm not. I wish I would have met 10 of them. I met Pramod Puri Maharaj and Sridhar Maharaj and Prabhupada, of course. I wish I would have met many more.
you'll have to meet them in the spiritual world now. Okay, it's after 10 o'clock now, at least here, Eastern Standard Time. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Sorry we didn't include Tom in reading, but we'll continue on Monday to finish this chapter. Any Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hari bol.
Uncles have a special perspective that even the father doesn't have. We can appreciate the father most, but the uncles also.
Prabhupada said they all went back to Godhead. All his godbrothers.
We missed them on the way there.
To be continued.
Yeah, they're in their Vani. Yeah, they're there in their Vani.
Yes.
Even in spirit, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
Near Jalakadasi Monday.
Oh,
but LA got it on Sunday.
Thank you for the reminder.
Anybody in LA?
Drink up.
California. Maybe the whole West Coast.
Drink up.
Thank you for the reminder. Monday, no grains, no water, just air and
no water. Don't dry up on it. Don't dry up on us.
Be a breatharian on Monday.
Keep a glass of water nearby for the next morning.
All right, I'm hitting the red button that says end with your permission. Okay, Hare Krishna.